Hi, welcome back. I'm Grayson.
I'm Caleb.
I'm Dominic.
And I'm Isaiah, and this is Fireside Friday Nights.
So this past week, I saw an article from Fox News titled, New Mexico Democrat Governor Slammed for Anti-Second Amendment Push, quote, illegally trying to snatch guns. So this past week, the New Mexican governor unveiled her public safety legislative agenda for the 2024 session. In that, were in concordance with her statements back in September of 2023, and Fox News did an article on this. So in the article, Fox News goes into detail about the New Mexico governor's decision to make, quote, the largest and most comprehensive public safety package in our state's history, end quote. Her other main quotes in this article were, in her speech were, quote, we are suspending open and concealed carry. Also, I can invoke additional powers. No constitutional right, in my view, including my oath, is intended to be absolute. There are restrictions on free speech. There are restrictions on my freedoms, end quote. So, obviously, this caused a big uproar between the two sides of the argument, and I thought that this area of discussion was a perfect topic for us to discuss. But before we get into it, make sure that you like this episode, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, and wherever you get your podcast, and turn on notifications. So, being under the umbrella of the type of podcast that we are, I thought that the topic of gun debate was right up our alley to talk about. So, but being that we are teenage guys, I thought that some outside sources with more experience would be useful. So on today's episode, our guest is Reverend Kevin Norton of Hibbing Alliance Church. He has served as a minister since 1982 and as a law enforcement chaplain since 1993. He's also the owner of Norton Shield Permit to Carry, serving as a certified instructor through the National Rifle Association and the United States Concealed Carry Association for concealed carry weapons and permits in the state of Minnesota. Nice to have you on, Kevin.
Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So going back to the article, what are your opinions on a governor who is put in charge of her state making restrictions on a constitutional amendment?
Well, it's going to be mute because she does not have that constitutional authority to just do what she wants because she doesn't like something. You have to go through due process. If it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, they would tell her she's wrong. That's just the way it's going to end up.
Yeah.
So it's another attempt for people to say, I don't like the way things are, so I'll do it my way.
Yeah. In her speech, she had talked about how she believes it'll end gun rates or end homicide and gun rates or like gun crime rates. But what I had felt with what her statements were, she said all of New Mexico must follow. Like she had two policies that were in concordance with her gun beliefs, and she said Albuquerque has to follow both of them, and the rest of the state has to follow some of them. But for the next 30 days, she's invoking that there is no concealed or open carry in the city of Albuquerque. So I was just curious, like, because she says, she doesn't believe that her constitutional right, including her oath, is intended to be absolute. And I feel, obviously, that's completely wrong.
It is. She does not have the right just to make edicts left and right. That's the reason why we have a parliamentary procedure and we have senates and congresses, because these kind of things that are going to change the Constitution have to go through the proper protocols.
Yeah.
So what I would probably hear is pushback, especially from the sheriff's departments in certain counties in New Mexico, where they would say we are not enforcing these laws.
Yeah.
Because they recognize the police officers are sworn to support and protect the Constitution. And when they realize that some politician is actually violating the Constitution, then they're not going to be in a position to say, well, we'll do what you want, even though it's wrong. So that's what I see is going to happen.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. Because I guess I felt she pretty much straight up threw the Constitution out the window, or like it's just full ignorance.
Well, I hate to put it this way, but you look at countries that have dictators, that's what they say. I don't care what anybody says. I'm going to do it my way. In short, that's what she said.
Yeah. So if she was able to do what she said she would, do you think it would help at all?
No. Here, let me give an example. Okay. This week I have been studying because I'm going to do a class for other chaplains on first aid for traumas because chaplains ride with police officers, and there's a possibility we come across trauma, or if we're there when a police officer gets shot, can we administer first aid to stabilize?
Right.
So I'm training to get certified to do that. And one of the things I just learned yesterday was Cornell University put out after they did a study, put out information that they discovered in the year 2021 in the United States, over 8,000 people died by knife wounds.
Wow.
Also in 2021, over 8,000 people died by gunshot wounds. Now, the higher number of those two, by only a couple hundred, was by knife.
That's
and
wild.
So you hear nobody arguing about we got to restrict the number of knives people have, the size of knives. I mean, there's a few there, here and there.
Yeah.
But it's always about the gun issue because the Second Amendment does prohibit politicians from going too far too fast.
Well, yeah, because the Second Amendment is put in place so that we can have a country militia if needed so that our country can fight for themselves, right?
That is correct. Matter of fact, there was debate because back when it was first written, the Second Amendment, it said that no government should infringe upon the right of a person to be in a militia and the right to bear arms. So it was challenged that, well, if you're not militia, then this doesn't apply. But the Supreme Court, a number of decades later, said, no, this means that any person in the United States has the right to bear arms, period, to either protect itself from criminals or from attack, or to protect itself from an overzealous government.
Yeah, and the Second Amendment, doesn't it? It lists that it shall not be infringed, correct?
That's what it says. It shall not be infringed upon. You look at these states that are now called constitutional carry states. They are abiding by the Constitution by letter because they're saying that you don't have to go and do a bunch of things and a bunch of hoops in order to have a gun and protect yourself. Whereas Minnesota, where I live, I'm a permit to carry holder, and I'm glad I get to teach on gun safety and situational awareness and those kind of things. But if a person doesn't go to the kind of class that I teach, they can't apply for a permit to carry.
So do you believe that firearms help prevent crimes in some ways?
Well, I believe they can, yes. I mean, obviously, you don't want to get into the argument like the statement's often said, it's good people with guns that stop bad people with guns.
Yeah.
And that is actually true. It's a shame that there are bad people with guns. But predominantly, statistically speaking, bad people with guns do not buy them legally. They steal them, or they buy them in the black market. Very few of them are purchased where they can be traced back to the owner.
Yeah, because that's how I feel. If they're limiting or restricting guns that are purchased legally from non-ill-meaning people, then ill-meaning people will still find their ways to have firearms, and then the non-ill-meaning people will not be able to protect themselves.
Right. The violence that happened isn't because of the gun. The gun is a tool, like a hammer or a knife. And in the hands of a person that understands how the tool works, respects it, uses it appropriately for sports or events or whatever, it's just a tool. You put that in the hands of a person that doesn't understand it, that's negligent, or a person that's violent, now it becomes a weapon. And so trying to restrict guns from getting into the hands of a bad person restricts them from being in the hands of a good person that's respectful and uses the firearm for the right purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, going on with that, because we're talking about like people who not necessarily should have them, but they might have them legally if it's restricted. Who do you actually think should be? Do you think we should have restrictions on who can buy a firearm?
I actually do, simply because if you look at school shootings or you look at one-on-one or gang shootings, whatever, predominantly it's either felons who are already on record, or it's people with mental health issues that aren't stable enough to have an instrument like that can be used in a negative way.
Yeah.
However, our government does a terrible job of looking at that aspect. They only look at the gun and say it's the gun's fault. It's not. It's the person who has it.
Yeah, that's really good because I had a thing where I was gonna ask your opinions on say like people with mental health issues as they so proclaim or ex-cons. I was gonna ask you that because if we see a lot of these school shootings that have been happening are people who are pushing back for political or religious beliefs who they say that they were oppressed or in some way mistreated, and that's why they went back for revenge. And I can't remember. I feel like it was the Nashville shooting a few months ago, and that was the only one that we didn't get confirmation on like what it was about right away. And it was because they were covering up because it made no sense, or they had no hot topic buzzword to put into their article that would make them, oh, they were so oppressed or whatever.
Yeah, well, I think the last one you're referring to was by a transgender person. Mm-hmm. And because that's such a political hot topic, they didn't want to put that in the press because they didn't want negativity toward that transgenderism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But predominantly, I mean, Columbine was like the first school shooting that made it unfortunately popular among students to do this. But all the students that do it have a profile of mental illness or at least an emotional state where they feel that the only way they can get attention and they want to rack up the head count of people that die because it will make them famous, even though they go out in a blaze of glory.
Yeah, that's because I don't want to like push like saying that it's all these people who are like this doing certain things. It's not because I don't want to say that just because they have a mental health issue, they're more likely to go out and commit a mass crime or a mass killing or anything like that. But if you look at the numbers, even they say people who are suicidal are 80% more likely to try a second time. So these people who have proclaimed mental illnesses, I feel that there has to be a background check or something so that they can't buy weapons. Because I know my dad. Well, I don't know how the laws are for buying in every place, but he went to this place to buy a gun, and they just did it. They didn't do like a quick background check, but they were just like, what's your job, what's your status, income, and then it wasn't like they surveyed him and then they asked if he was an ex-con, obviously, or if he was a U.S. citizen. And yes, these are necessary regulations to put in place because if you don't have a citizenship, I mean, we're not going to be selling you weapons,
right?
But that's a whole other topic that we don't need to get into for immigration. And
yeah, it sure is. It sure is. Well, let me back up just a second so that it's very clear to your listeners.
Okay.
A person with mental health, we don't put them all in the same bucket. In the same way, we don't put everybody who has a gun in the same bucket. There are people with mental health issues that they're getting help and so forth. They're not propensity to violence, but they have issues with anxiety. They have issues with other things that are affecting their mental health. And so just because a person is classified as someone with a mental health issue doesn't automatically target them as someone who should not be able to buy a firearm. What the mental health issue and the severity of it would, and that's why there's got to be research when they're doing the background checks on people that have mental health issues. In the same way, a person that buys a gun, predominantly, they're not going to use it for bad purposes, but there might be some that do. And so you can't say guns are bad for everybody, and you can't say mental health is bad. Everybody's bad if they got mental health issues. That's not the case.
Do you think that there are enough restrictions in place for who can buy firearms?
Well, each state is different.
Okay.
And so in the state of Minnesota, they got plenty of restrictions. I mean, it's more on the heavy side than it would be on the easier side. So, for instance, here in Minnesota, if you're going to buy a firearm, you have to go to a police station and apply for a permit to purchase. So you can't walk into a gun store and say, "Can I buy a gun?" You have to get a permit to purchase. That takes 8 to 10 days to do the background check and that kind of thing, and then they send you a card that says you're allowed now to purchase a firearm.
Okay.
And yet, when you go to a store to buy a firearm, and you're still going to be there 15, 20 minutes until that person behind the counter gets notification that, yep, you're on file and you can buy a
Yeah.
gun. And so then they'll give you the firearm. If you have computer issues at that store, you're not going to get that gun because they can't get that response back. There are some stores that they're afraid of liability if someone buys a gun and then uses it inappropriately. They're afraid of liability, so they're still going to tell you, not many, but there are some in Minnesota that'll say, come back in 2 days and you can pick up your gun.
Oh, okay.
Now, that's not going to be the government slowing it down. That's the actual clerk or the store
Okay.
that's slowing it down. Most stores won't do that if you have a permit to purchase.
Okay.
Okay.
When you get a permit to carry in the state of Minnesota, it allows you to carry a firearm, any firearm, rifle, shotgun, or handgun, loaded or loaded, concealed, or open, anywhere that's allowed.
Yeah.
And it allows you to purchase a firearm with your permit to carry.
Okay.
But that has to go through the sheriff's office, not the police department.
I was going to ask one question, but you already rolled into it. Was so because cops may have a hard time with this, but if someone has an open carry, right?
Yes.
And they have a shotgun, and let's say they're walking around like downtown.
Just strapped to their back, or
No, just like in their hands. They're just walking.
Yep.
They're not doing anything. They're just walking there. What will the cops do? Will they be like, "Hey, this is a suspicious guy. Should we check it out?" Or what's going to happen?
Well, I think in any state, unless you're very much in a rural area, a small town, I think any state, if there's a police officer that sees someone walking down the street with a shotgun that's not by a gun store or hardware store or whatever, they're probably going to pull them over and go, "Hey, what's happening?" They're going to try to find out that this guy is just carrying a gun from point A to point B. So for instance, in Minnesota, I mentioned that you can have, once you get your permit to carry, you can carry a rifle down the street if you want.
Right.
You can carry a shotgun loaded on the front seat of your car when you're driving. But if you get pulled over by a police officer and they see a shotgun on the front seat, they're probably going to pull their gun out and say, "Let's talk about this." And then they'll figure it out because they don't know what's going on and they're not going to take any chances. With a handgun, you can tell someone, "I'm a legal permit to carry holder. I have a firearm. What do you want me to do?" And then they'll give you instructions.
Right. Yeah, you definitely I don't know how to phrase this, but so when someone has an open or concealed carry, especially concealed carry, should that person always say, "Hey, I got a gun on me," no matter where they are, or should they?
In Minnesota, this is what Minnesota statute says, and some states are different. Minnesota says if you are required, this is literally what the wording is, you are required to inform a law enforcement official that you're carrying a firearm, comma,
okay.
if they ask.
Okay.
Oh,
So you're not. But my experience as a law enforcement chaplain is police officers would rather know on the front end that they're talking to someone with a weapon than in the middle or toward the end of the conversation. So I tell people, in your verbiage, never use the word firearm or gun. Just simply say, "I'm a legal permit to carry holder. I'm carrying. What would you like me to do?" And then they'll take it from there.
Just saying "Hey, I'm I'm not doing anything wrong. This is just what I'm doing because these are some rights that I have."
Exactly.
Okay.
Police officers respect those rights. They understand it.
okay.
They do.
So, say you get pulled over and you're carrying legally. Can the cop do anything if you do not tell them that you have, say, a pistol strapped to your waist, or say they ask you to get out of the car for a different reason? I don't know.
No. They'll start asking you more questions for sure. At that point, they'll ask you, "Do you have any other weapons that are on you?" I mean, now because now they're in danger potentially. They're in danger, and so they want to know what the risk factor is. And so typically, if they find out there's a gun while you're talking, their suspicions will rise because it's like, "Well, why wouldn't this person tell me this on the get-go?
Oh, okay.
Why are they hiding this?" Because they're in a job that every day they go to crisis and violence. And so they're very suspicious of everybody because they don't know who the good guy is. They don't know who the bad guy is initially.
Yeah, I do like that because, as you said, you don't have to say that you're carrying, but you can prevent more issues if you did. But going
You
back
can
to
prevent more issues.
yeah, going back to because you talked about people killed with knives and people who were killed with guns, and so say if I had a knife strapped to my leg or something, there's nothing saying that I have a weapon on me, correct? Like if I just had that on.
And you don't need a permit to carry for a knife.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Yep.
And I also so when also going back to what you said, when it's all about the user, so let's say not a knife, but a hammer. So if a criminal chooses to use a hammer as their weapon, would anybody or could the government try to ban hammers?
No, they wouldn't. Or
Yeah,
baseball
yeah.
bat or club. I mean, they're not going to try to ban those things. They might try to put some restrictions on them. For instance, you can't have a knife that's longer than 6 inches and that kind of thing. But
Okay.
clearly, a knife is a universal tool that everybody uses,
Yeah.
right? And it may not be a Bowie knife; it could just be a butter knife. It still can kill someone.
Mhm.
So therefore, they're not going to work at banning that, but they might try to put limitations on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because technically, so talking about things that can cause harm, going with limits. I know there's been a recent large ban on nitrous oxide, so like propellant for paintball guns, and because
Yep.
people nowadays are smoking this stuff. I don't even understand why you'd want to do that, but they're out here smoking this, and then they're putting limits on this substance that has practical uses and was never intended for harm. I mean, you could say go back to dynamite, where that was created for mining, and Alfred Nobel was so scarred by the fact that it was used for violence that he created the Nobel Peace Prize just because he didn't want it. He's like the blood is not on my hands. I'm just going to say, hey, this is not my doing.
Right. And dynamite wasn't designed to blow up people. And
Yeah.
for the most part, it didn't. I mean, it did in some cases. People use it poorly and with evil intent, but that was not the majority of its usage.
Yeah. So like practical things that can be used as weapons, they're not going to do it, but there's such a big controversy over firearms that we have to limit this. Because even, I mean, TSA, that's kind of their job to like make sure that things aren't going out. But they're so secure, like through the TSA, that you can't have toothpaste that's over 4 ounces or whatever. It's like they're putting
Right.
limits on these things because they have so much more to protect in their business rather than say a guy walking down the street with a hammer.
Yep. And you know what? And I don't mind those precautions. It's a little inconvenient when you fly and go someplace, but hey, you realize they're doing it to protect everybody else on the plane. That's great. And you can fly in the United States domestically with a firearm. You just have to check it in at the checkout counter in your check-in luggage. You can't put it in your carry-on. It has to be unloaded. It has to be in a hard lockable case. You have to declare it. But you can still fly from one state to another as long as you don't land in Canada or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much information you have on that. So, like, what would you say the United States restrictions compared to Canada? Well, I mean, all the states are different. Or, I mean, actually, are all the states different?
I'll say this. The United States is bad. Canada is worse.
Yeah.
Right now, their government has restricted some firearms, limiting what they can use them for, and they got much more room to roam in terms of hunting and stuff than we do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But they're much more strict. Now you think about Sweden as a country, okay? They allow firearms in their country. Matter of fact, in Sweden, it's mandatory that once a male anyway graduates from high school, they have to put in 1 year of military service. It's required by
okay.
law. They're trained how to use a gun, et cetera, et cetera. And if they choose not to remain in the military, or if they stay in the military for any length of time, when they leave, the government says you have the option to take your firearm home with you or not. Because we want everybody in our country, if we're ever invaded, to be able to defend the country. And that's why they have all their young men go in the military, and why young men are taught how to use a firearm. Because then if they are invaded and they all have guns in their house, guess what? You've got a larger army than just what's in uniform.
Yes.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's the whole reason the Second Amendment's put in place is so that we can have
Yep.
or if we were ever invaded, per se, or something like that, that our people could fight for our country.
Right. Well, I truly believe that this is one reason, especially like during the Cold War in the 1960s, we were not invaded as a country because there's so many firearms in our country. It's not like you're just going to overwhelm the army and be done with it.
Yeah.
You've got all the civilians that can fight back.
So thinking about just in our country, like I'm very glad that we are in this country and we have all these freedoms. What do you think about all of the other countries that don't have this freedom?
It, it's up to them, right? I feel
Yeah.
badly for them because they're living in fear. At the same time, I have a daughter that lives in Ireland, and Ireland is not a gun-friendly country. You are not allowed to own a firearm in Ireland except under certain circumstances. They don't have like high-powered rifles or semi-automatics, but they do have. I know. I just saw this the other day. They have from where my daughter lives, 10 minutes from where she lives, they have a skeet shooting sports club.
Oh, really?
But the difference is that if you buy a gun in Ireland and you are in a part of a gun club, your gun is locked and stored at the gun club, and you check it out like a library book when you go to do your gun shooting, and then you check it back in before you leave.
Yeah.
So you really don't possess it, but it's yours.
Right. So don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it was like somewhere in China where you can technically own a gun there, but it has to be like the gun has to be locked in the safe, the ammunition has to be locked in the safe, and those two safes has to be on the opposite ends of the house. So like
I don't know
yeah,
that one.
I don't know where I got that from, or maybe I'm just totally making this up or something.
So
I don't know.
So,
it's just something
so
I
let me
thought about.
share this with you though. This is where you got it from.
Okay.
They were in the state of Minnesota considering that very law
Really?
Oh.
in the state of Minnesota that you could have a firearm in one safe in your home, but you had to keep the ammunition separate in a different safe in your home. So imagine if you had a home invasion, you'd have to ask the people invading your house, can you wait here for
Yeah.
5-10 minutes so I can
Exactly.
retrieve this stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is just not practical. So,
It's not practical. That one didn't pass, hallelujah. But the red flag law passed.
And what would that be?
And the red flag law is if my next door neighbor gets mad at me, this is a scenario, and calls the police department and says, this Kevin Norton, I'm afraid of them, and he's got a gun, you should take those guns away. They would have the legal right to do that until they get it figured out.
Oh, okay.
No due process, no search warrant. Knock on my door, take my guns, and go.
okay.
I know.
Now,
Oh, sorry.
fortunately, small town police departments, they're not going to do that. Minneapolis, probably yes. St. Paul, probably yes. Maybe, all right? But small towns, it's like, no, we understand how this works. We have to realize if there is a danger before we're going to go in there and start taking people's guns.
Yeah.
In doing research for this episode, I had seen like the most guns in certain countries. So the United States has the most amount of guns per person. It's like 133 per 100 people. So I'm guessing that includes our military size. And then
How many per people?
131 per every 100 person. So
Oh, wow. I don't have enough guns, I guess.
looks like we need to get a few more. And then second place, it was Yemen, which is only at 52 guns per 100 people. And Canada was third. I can't remember what the percentage was. And then Finland was fourth with 32 per 100 people. And I thought it was really funny how they're saying that Finland had like the least amount of gun crime, or like one of the least amounts of all countries for like gun crimes, and they have the fourth most amount of guns. And that's because they'll say, having guns, does that prevent crimes from being committed? And I was just wondering what your opinion was on them saying that all these guns is what's causing the problem.
No, the amount of guns, again, it has nothing to do with the guns, other than they're a tool that are used for evil. It has to do with the people that are getting hold of them. I pretty much can guarantee you most criminals, if they know that you're going to be a hard target, they're not going to go after you. They're going to go after the soft target. They're going to go after the places that have signs up that say guns aren't allowed here. Great, then I don't have any resistance. That's where they're going to go.
Right.
And so if they know that there's people there that might shoot back, like, I don't think that's a good plan. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Do you think that in the recent years, say the American, like just the American common person, like the opinion in the country has shifted on gun control?
Yes, because the country's becoming more urbanized.
Yeah. Okay.
And the urban cities, they're the ones that, they have the higher population, so they have the voting block, and it kind of goes trickle down that ladder kind of thing. And so, but I do believe there are still way too many sportsmen that love the sport of shooting at clay pigeons, shooting at targets, competition shooting, going out hunting. There's so obviously, because we have hundreds and thousands and millions of guns in our country. And so people still love that sport. So it's going to be extremely hard just to say, everybody stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I know. In researching this, I had seen there was a debate page, and they were talking about pros and cons to having concealed carry. And then I know one I saw was concealed carry. So a pro from the allowing concealed carry point of view is a pro is concealed carry allows the individual more protection. And yes, I believe that. But then a con is that it can increases the chances of a confrontation becoming more lethal. So along with that, owning guns, you have responsibilities, and you have to recognize those. I don't know. What are your opinions on that?
Absolutely. The reason I got into permit to carry classes as an instructor was when I got my permit to carry, I was shocked when I got mine at the little amount of training that was required in terms of information. It's like,
Okay.
shoot this many shots, 20 shots. You hit the target 80% of the time. Okay, you're good to go to carry a gun in public. And I thought to myself, I am not good to go to carry a gun in public. I need more practice. I need to understand what am I up against. And so when I teach my classes, it's kind of an introduction to helping build a self-defense plan physically. That's the handgun part. But also legally, because you're going to face that if you have to defend yourself. Financially, it's going to cost thousands of dollars. Morally, if you shoot someone or if you take someone's life, what's that going to do for you? Or what's it going to do to you? So I really am into it because I want people to know, yes, I think you have the right to carry a firearm to protect yourself, but you need to know what you're getting into. And if you don't think you can handle it, then don't do that.
Yeah. This is going back to something you said a while ago, but we were talking about how the user is the effect, not the weapon itself. I don't know how familiar you are with the Babylon Bee, but they'll do satirical political videos, and they had one where
I know them.
They had one where it was like a court scene, and they tried the gun itself rather than the person, and they had like a lawyer defending the gun because the person's like, the gun shot me, it wasn't the person.
Yep.
And so it shows that like in our country, we have these people, and because like people will show how ridiculous these arguments sound, but these are actually what people believe, and it's just kind of sad to see how far our culture has shifted.
And how sad is it that instead of making stricter laws and stricter penalties for breaking those laws, we're allowing people to do, dashing in and confiscating somebody else's property and stealing, and they don't go after them. And it's like, well, then everybody becomes afraid. Ever since we've had the COVID-19, when all of a sudden, and the Floyd thing in Minneapolis, and suddenly people were afraid because they said, police officers, we don't know if they're going to be able to protect us because the laws are actually against them rather than for them. And so my classes grew exponentially, especially among women, because they're afraid.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's really interesting to like see how people, because some people become more afraid, some people become more afraid of the people who are afraid. So they want to have harsher restrictions because these more people are becoming afraid of what could happen.
Right. And I agree. I mean, I never want to shoot anybody, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So if somebody comes to me and they want to hurt me and the police get involved and they're arrested, well, don't let them go. Don't tell them, okay, 6 months in jail and you're fine. If they're being violent and they're potential killers, they should be put away for a long, long time,
Exactly.
not
Yeah.
released early and then put back on the street to do it again.
Yes.
Just one thought that I had about this. So in allowing our people to, so besides New Mexico, I'll say, in the states, because all the states up until this point, they have some ability to carry weapons, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the New Mexican governor, she had said her justification for her act was that there will be others who will follow in our footsteps, creating their own public safety corridors, which in effect may also make New Mexico safer. And I was just like, I don't think this is going to catch on. And I was wondering, do you think that it'll be more that this type of thing will be shut down, or more people will catch on to this?
No, they're always going to make the challenge. There's always going to be those people that are anti-gun, and so they're going to try everything they can to stop guns from being available to the public. And so, yeah, I mean, other states that are in the same frame of mind politically, they're definitely going to watch this close, because if it is allowed to slide, they're going to jump on the bandwagon. But I don't see it. I don't see it happening, because the Constitution is pretty clear, and it may not be absolute, but it's pretty strong. You can't just say, "Well, I'm not going to do it this time," because it's not that absolute.
Yeah.
No, it's pretty strong. Your freedom of speech, you can't yell fire in a hotel, right? Or in a theater. That's not freedom of speech. That's making threats.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Same thing with the firearm. Okay? Yeah, if you misuse a firearm, you should be put in jail and tried for that.
Yes.
But the other part is, if you're a governor, or if you're a leader in a state, or if you're the president of the United States, you can't make laws willy-nilly. There is a due process that must take place. That's what keeps us safe, and it allows the constituents, the people in this country, to feel like we have a voice.
Yes.
That's why we vote them into office.
So I know, again, this country has a lot of freedoms. And I know, like, some people will, modify their guns and things like that. And I don't know if a ton of people who are going to be listening to this knows about it, but would you be able to elaborate on what ghost guns are?
I don't know the exact law, because it seems to change all the time. But a ghost gun is basically like let's say I got a friend of mine a number of years ago. He bought a kit, 2 kits actually. He did it with his son. This was a number of years ago, and he built 2 AR-15s.
Okay.
So those aren't registered. They didn't go through a gun store, So they don't. There's serial numbers really don't exist other than on the frame, and so that can be considered a ghost gun, because they don't know that. How did it get into production? It didn't go through a normal gun building company, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's considered a ghost gun. It's not traceable, that kind of thing. And of course, it was just a hobby that he did with his son. It was something they went out shooting with it, kind of deal. But that would be one classification of a ghost gun.
And it's completely legal to not manufacture and produce, but manufacture your own firearms. Say, like, people who make collectible, like, replica models, or say they build their own, or 3D print, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. As long as it's not fully automatic.
Okay, yeah,
Because that is against the law. But otherwise, yeah. I mean, yeah, like a printer gun or 3D printer gun. It's like, well, how do you stop those? I mean, the machine. Are you going to outlaw the machine? No, because it prints other things too. So,
Well, I was going to say, do you see any threats at all with other people making guns at all?
well, let's put it this way. Do I see any threats? Yeah. If someone's making a gun to use it for evil, that's a threat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, valid.
But outside of that, if someone's making it as a hobby, no, it's not a threat.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's interesting to note right now, we are not required to register our guns with the government.
Huh. Really?
So even when I buy a firearm, like from a gun store, now that serial number will be registered with the gun owner, but I don't have to now write to the government and say I just bought a gun and here's my registration number. It's good to have that registration number, that serial number, so that if it gets stolen, you can, say this is. So if you find it, this is mine. But currently, we're not required to register guns that we purchase.
Okay.
At least in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, and even with that, it's like things that it's like vehicles. They have serial numbers on them to be tracked, and because
Right.
like a car, what does it mean? It's going back to the things that could cause harm. The amount of people who are killed in car accidents or hit by vehicles. It's like these things. There could be a guy who goes out intentionally to go run over someone with his car, but we're not going to ban
Right.
cars. It's like, yeah,
Right.
I really like what your point.
Let me take this one further. More people are killed in drunk driving accidents than with gunfire every year. Why don't they take away alcohol? Why don't they take away cars? Because
Good point.
that's what's killing people, right? No, it's the driver who is driving impaired. Deal with the source of the problem, not with the instrument used to cause the injury.
Yeah, and that the being impaired from alcohol or, as we were talking about before, mental health. That's the same thing. If someone's registered for like drunk, having a history of being drunk and drunk driving accidents, they're going to be limited in being able to buy firearms. Or is that not true?
Not unless it's a felony.
Oh, okay.
Again, it's not the equipment. It's the person that's going to use it. So why penalize those who are responsible for those that are irresponsible?
Yeah, I don't know if we have any. I don't think we have really any other questions. So I think we'll probably wrap up our episode here. Thank you for being on the show with us today and sharing your input.
Hey, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for tuning into this episode and see you later. Bye.